What? I mean, I don't know if I can play their thing uninterrupted before my on my channel, you know?
That's true. True.
Yeah, that's my only concern.
Don't worry,
But
you'll find it very based.
okay. I'll just record just in case. Decide to use clips of it or something. Because most scientists said so. Damn.
A mystic, superstitious, Christian faith-healing Scientologist, Mormon, and homeopath was delivering a sermon on Jesus, her imaginary tulpa who can't get over the fact that people pleasure themselves, and known taker of wheels.
Before today's sermon begins, you must get on your knees and worship God and accept that He is the most highly enlightened being the world will ever know, even greater than Charles Darwin.
At this moment, a gentlemanly, pro-rationalist, brave atheist crusader champion who had successfully rejected old church dogma and become enlightened by his intelligence stood up and held up a bone from a human skeleton.
Face.
Milady, is this a rib bone? Like the one from which the biblical character of Eve was fashioned?
The arrogant homeopath smirked quite Christianly and smugly replied,
You betcha. Eve was indeed fashioned from a rib, just like the one you have there, you dim-witted sinner who shall burn in hell for all eternity.
Jesus.
Wrong. Biblical Eve was not fashioned from a rib because she never existed due to the fact that God doesn't real, which we know because nobody has ever been fashioned from a rib. And if Eve really did come from a rib, then why are there still ribs?
the superstitious palm-reading Scientologist was visibly
Facts.
shaken and dropped her
Facts
collection
and logic.
and copy of the King James Bible translated for the limited vocabulary of a Texan hillbilly. She friend-zoned the brave atheist and stormed out of the room, crying those closed-minded homeopathic crocodile tears. The same tears that mystic deity-worshipping phrenologists cry for the damned, whose problems are due to a combination of their own life choices and circumstances forced upon them by unjust theocratic laws, not punishments from a non-existent sky wizard when they
True.
jealously try to claw justly earned wealth from the honest laborer who, unlike the church, pays taxes to support these mass brainwashing cults against his will. There is no doubt that, at this point, our preacher of anti-science, Sarah Palin, wished she could into space and explore the galaxy, and become more than a superstitious, new age, crystal-healing, critical thought-suppressing soccer mom wish fulfillment.
Was that Pedo Bear? Like, what was
She said very
that?
much that she had a fedora to wear to become enlightened by her intelligence, but in her years of ignorance she had never learned how to tip even a trilby. The congregation applauded and all pledged fealty to Richard Dawkins that day and accepted Bill Nye the Science Guy as their one true spiritual leader. A transitional fossil named Archaeopteryx flew into the church and perched atop a fresco of Jesus, which then crumbled off the wall to reveal a long since painted over periodic table of the elements, and he shed a euphoric tear into the collection plate. The Epicurean paradox was quoted several times, and Nikola Tesla himself showed up and decreed a nationwide law of no creationism in the classroom. Even though technically this law already existed, it now included Sunday school because if it's a school, then it's a classroom. The church building was repurposed as an abortion clinic, and the preacher was excommunicated the next day. She died of preventable illnesses because she refused to get vaccinated, and her remains, which are made of star stuff, were absorbed into the biosphere and eventually radiocarbon dated by advanced spacefaring societies looking back in horror upon the dark times when there were still fools who believed in magic sky fairies until the world was saved by brave atheists. And what was the name of that one brave, euphoric atheist crusader champion? Why, it was Carl Sagan. Checkmate, God worshippers. Imagination spaceship.
I'm just so impressed they found a way to put Potato Jesus in there.
They worked real hard on this, you can tell.
Yeah. It had all the mid-2010 memes for sure. including the dubstep of the era. Like, so good.
Ninja Turtle with the flat earth on its back. Too much spare time.
True. It's pretty good. Pretty good.
Fuck, are people not in here? It is midnight. This is the time we agreed on.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. They were bitching about it for like the last hour,
Yeah.
waiting for it to start. Whatever. I'm not gonna make you wait. I'm kind of ready to get going here. So
Shaking
let
my
me
head. SMH shaking
yeah.
my head.
True. Let me do this. All right, I'm gonna start here. Okay, so tonight I'm going to be debating another atheist. We're both atheists.
Mhm.
Big 1D. We're going to be debating anti-theism, basically if religion is good or bad for society broadly, generally. Is it a net positive or a negative? My position, as those of you listening probably already know, is I think that it is ultimately a bad thing for society. I am, excuse me, I am an anti-theist. I guess before I go into opening statements or anything, I'll let Lundy go ahead and say his piece here.
You sure?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Yeah, so I believe that religion is a net positive, generally speaking, for society, both historically and in the modern day. I think that obviously you can point to a lot of bad things that religion has been a part of or caused even over the course of history and today. You can point to the modern evangelical church. You can point to all the horrible things that they're doing. None of it really matters, and the reason why is because the main people who have been fighting against these sorts of overreaches and crimes and crusades and whatnot from Christians or whatever the case may be, has always been other religious people. You know, going back in the day, at least here in America, abolitionism was being led by Christians in the same way that slavery was being led by Christians. We can thank, of course, Dr. Martin Luther King for heading up the civil rights era and making sure that gets passed. These are, and even the presidents, the judges, the institutions in general, are generally speaking run by people who are members of various different types of faiths. In the Kitzmiller v. Dover trial, which is the last time that the evangelicals tried to slip creationism into classrooms under the guise of intelligent design, who was the main witness on the part going against intelligent design, but Dr. Kenneth Miller, a Catholic who fully embraces evolution and does not appreciate the denigration of science by pretending that what is essentially one massive argument from ignorance is in fact a scientific theory that should be in any way taught to children. The judge appointed by George W. Bush for that particular trial, also a Christian, a practicing Christian. So it doesn't really matter how many times you talk about how Christians or Islam people or Jews or Hindus or whoever do bad things, because the people who put a stop to that are other members of the faith. So ultimately that becomes a wash. So at what point do we come to the point there's an actual positive thing to be gained from religion? Well, I can get to that, but I'll go ahead and let Algie respond to what I just said.
Yeah, sure, of course. So, I mean, you're talking about a time when most people were religious, and those who weren't religious weren't really out and open about it, right? For a lot of human history, when you talk about like during like abolition times or whatever, when you're talking more broadly about civil rights, there were plenty of secular and atheist civil rights leaders in like the 50s and 60s, right? Like A. Philip Randolph, W.B. Du Bois, James Baldwin, plenty of people who were atheists at that time, both in the streets and also who are important figures in the movement. So, I mean, it's kind of silly to pretend like Christians are the only ones who are able to stand up and to do what's right and to shift history in the right direction. Well, yeah, I mean, your whole point was that religion may cause people to do this evil shit, but excuse me, it also causes them to do good shit too. and we have you almost. Yeah, I felt like you were making sort of a no atheist in foxholes kind of argument there in the beginning, where you were saying that these movements are always the result of Christian people doing like liberation theology, basically. Which, of course, that's not true. There were a lot of different people, both religious and irreligious, who were part of the civil rights movement.
Yeah,
Um,
just to be clear, I never said that atheists or secular people, which are not synonymous, we're never a part of any sort of pushback that religious people have ever done when religious people have ever done anything bad. I'm just saying that they aren't the core people, which they aren't.
Well, just because they're not the majority, right, in general. But
Yeah.
I think if we, I mean, I don't have statistics pulled on this, but I feel like if we were to look more deeply into it, we would find that atheists, irreligious, secular people are more like all those. Not that they're all the same thing, but all those categories are more likely to be politically engaged in, like, towards the left or what we would consider the good side of politics with civil rights and
Maybe, but you can
fighting
also
for
find
equity.
plenty of those types of people who are a part of the Groyper movement, for instance. In fact, there's been a massive
Sure.
influx lately of atheistic Nazis who don't want to worship
Well,
Jesus, of course, because he's a Jew and he's a quote unquote kike on a stick is the word that they use for him.
I'm
So
sure there are some of them that do, but like Nick Fuentes and the Groypers are, pretty much tradcath. Their
sure.
movement is about
So basically,
traditional
in the same
Catholicism.
sense that there are plenty of Christians who do bad things and plenty of Christians who fight against those bad things, and
Mhm.
well, we've moved in the direction of those Christians who have fought against those bad things. There are also atheists who fight for bad things,
Right.
and then
Yep. And
atheists who fight against those atheists. And so, it doesn't feel,
Right,
doesn't
right.
seem holistically that to say any one particular secular or atheistic ideology is the key to us ending the bad things that religious people do.
Well, I guess we can go on and, and talk about like whether religious people or atheist people are more of the reason for more suffering, or that. Which, I mean, I don't really hinge my argument for why religion is bad for society on that. It's more fundamental than things that individual religious people or that religious groups do. I guess I'll start by asking you, because this is going to kind of go to my point here. Why are you an atheist?
Personally, I have seen a lot of decent, high-level philosophical arguments on the likes of which most people probably haven't looked into. That I think have persuaded me to at least be relatively certain that a God doesn't exist. I don't know for a fact that he doesn't, but my doxastic attitude is certainly above 50%.
Well, I mean, if we're honest, we're all sort of agnostic to whether or not we don't know, right? But what I'm kind of trying to get at here is that you've never seen evidence that like of a strong argument for God.
I think that probably one of the strongest arguments for God that can be formulated in a pretty decent way is the argument from design, essentially pointing to the world and around us and talking about how it appears, at the very least, that we have that we appear to have luckily stumbled across a timeline in which we get to exist. I think there are ways to phrase it that are very weak, and I think there are ways to phrase it that are much stronger. It's one of the more popular arguments that has been refined over and over again amongst religious
Yeah, I
people.
think I think the argument for design is not really a good argument, right? Because it's sort of based on assumption and it's saying like, well, look at the way that everything sort of came together. This is too perfect for it to happen randomly or whatever. And I would just like to say to that, I mean, you can look at all the planets that exist in the all the solar systems in the universe that exist where we don't have evidence of life or we just have evidence of nothing or whatever. We can look at all the people who exist and their lives are suffering. We can look at how the world came into existence and how it will most likely end from the sun exploding a million years from now or whatever. So I mean, like, you can say like, oh, it's so perfect, it's so precise. I think like given the billions of things and over this giant expanse of time, like, of course, it could potentially happen. We don't have a reason to think it couldn't happen or that life isn't somewhere else in the universe or whatever. So I think like that kind of argument
Phrasing
doesn't
specifically
really
that
hold
I'm
any water
referring-
for me.
The phrasing specifically that I'm referring to is that when you take all the various different specifics and you combine them together, it makes it, at the very least, a plausible case that some sort of mind might have been behind all the various different constants that have led to this very specific state of affairs.
Well, I think anything is possible, right?
No,
I
not
don't think
possible, plausible.
it's plausible, right? I don't see how that's plausible because Like there's no reason to think it. There's no reason to assume the affirmative of that position, I guess. The position that we are designed from an intelligent designer or whatever. I would almost argue though, like even if, we're not really debating atheism. I did ask you, so it's kind of my fault. But even if like that, even if that was like most religious people's conception of God, that doesn't say anything about the claims of individual religions or the dogma that religious people would follow, right?
Which, yeah, I don't really care because the dogma that various different religious people follow changes from person to person. So you can't
Sure,
really make like
yeah.
a categorical idea as to what religion means to everyone because that's just not possible.
Sure, but I'm saying like of the main religions we have, right? When you look at, well, I mean, we can make a distinction between like just someone who's a theist versus someone who's religious, right? Someone who thinks like that maybe there's a God, there's probably a God, versus someone who
I think
believes.
that would be a weird distinction to make because everybody who's religious, I think, well, I shouldn't say everybody, but I think the vast majority of people who are religious, you would probably classify as theists.
Right, but I'm saying not all theists are religious, even though all religious.
Sure,
Well, most. I mean, like there's Buddhists who are atheists, right? Who still believe in some of the supernatural claims
Yeah.
of Buddhism. So, I mean, they do exist, but
Jainists.
I mean, I feel like, like that's not a position though. Like you can say like, well, maybe that's the best argument I've heard, but you're able to see how that argument isn't like actually, like it doesn't follow like an argument, right? It's not a claim built on a claim that equals a conclusion that makes sense from those claims, right?
No, it is an argument.
So what are the? Can you kind of break it down for me more in like
I
the
don't-
equation of
is
an
this
argument?
relevant to the topic?
I mean, kind of in a way.
Could you explain?
We don't have to. We don't look. The point
'Cause,
I'm
like, we're
trying to
both
make is
atheists.
that
I don't know why you're asking me to give like the best argument I can think of for why religion is true.
because I think that it, and I think like if you really antagonize it, you also would come to the agreement. And the reason that people are atheists, typically authentically, is because the arguments or the evidence that has been presented for the existence of a God, it doesn't stack up, right? Like it's illogical or fallacious, or there's some issue with it. There's some assumption being made. There's no good reason to believe in that position if we're thinking about it logically. I think.
I don't think that's the case for a lot of atheists. Actually, I think a lot of atheists are just kind of like.
Well,
follow
I mean,
the
like
vibe.
there's people who are maybe atheists for stupid reasons, but I'm saying like if it's a question about a knowledge position, right? Like, do you believe this thing is true? And the only acceptable reason to believe in it or not is if there's suitable evidence to, or not to. Right? If there's suitable
in a
evidence
sense,
for a
yeah,
claim,
I think that you should have at least like an argument that you find compelling if you're going to believe in something. But since the vast majority of people don't even really go that far, I don't see it as like relevant.
I think most atheists do. Like most of the atheists I've, at least, I mean, this is anecdotal. Most of the atheists I've talked to understand that they're atheists because the belief is irrational.
I don't.
The
think,
positive
I don't-
position
I
is.
think if you were to poll every like as like I don't know 10,000 random atheists, I think that like the vast majority of them wouldn't even know like one of the general mainstream philosophical arguments against God's existence. I think they just
Well,
would-
they may.
would just have
Well,
no
what I'm
fucking
trying to
clue.
say is there's a distinction between someone who's an atheist because they've, like, in their mind, whatever argument or evidence they've seen doesn't compel them to agree with the position that there is a God, right? And then there are people who are atheists for maybe bad reasons, like maybe being an atheist is cool or they hate God or whatever the fuck, right? Like whatever lame
Or their
reason.
friends
Like
are
there's
atheists,
good
they wanna
reasons.
hang out, or they're in
Sure,
they're
sure,
just-
like
they're
for
just generally
social
in a
reasons, yeah.
community that
And
generally
the
tends to be
and
more
those are
atheistic.
bad reasons to be an atheist, right?
Sure.
Because they're not like it's not a good reason to have a position on something.
Sure.
Okay. So my argument here is that when you get down to it, and it's the same thing for religious people, right? I would extend the same thing to them. Like, in order to be a theist, to believe in a God, first of all, but then a religion on top of that, you have to have a good reason to believe in that. Otherwise, it's irrational.
Yeah, sure.
And I don't think there's a good reason to. And I'm not saying that in like the super malicious, like, oh, you believe it, so you're retarded or whatever. I mean, that's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying like, if we really go down to like any position that you would argue, the reasons that a religious person has for believing what they do are flawed, are not correct. There's a problem with their logic, or they're not antagonizing the
Let
question
me just go
honestly
ahead
or
and point this
genuinely.
out, like super quickly and easily here. So there's a book
Sure.
that that was written by a philosopher. And the book's name was Arguing About Gods, and the main thesis of the book
Oh
is
yeah.
that there is absolutely no argument for or against God that is a knockdown, drag out proof. There's no real way to actually antagonize the concept of a God's existence in a way that is rational for one to come to one conclusion or the other.
Well, the atheist position isn't a positive claim, right? It's not
It
a
is.
positive position. It's not. It's
It
simply
is.
saying that this evidence, I don't see this evidence as
So
valid.
my
That's all it
definition of
is.
atheism is having a doxastic attitude of at least 50, greater than 50% that God doesn't exist.
I mean, the definition of atheism would just be you don't believe in God.
Yeah, so
You haven't seen good
rocks are
evidence for
atheists and
God.
babies
Yeah.
are atheists and that sort of stupidity.
Well, I would assume like anything. I mean, sure, babies are atheists, maybe, but I mean, a rock doesn't have the ability to like think, though. So I
But
wouldn't
by
really call it
definition,
an
if we're just
atheist.
calling it lack of belief, well, rocks lack of belief.
Well,
in
I would
God's
say
deity.
like in order to lack a belief, you have to even be able to hold beliefs, right?
No,
Otherwise,
that
that's
doesn't
like
follow at all.
saying
That's not logical.
that's like
That doesn't
saying
make any logical sense, actually. There's no logical basis for that
that.
at all. You can, by definition, things that don't have beliefs.
So
lack beliefs.
hold on. So by default, everything doesn't have an opinion, right?
Right.
So because a rock doesn't have an opinion, would it make sense to care what a rock's opinion on something is?
Well, that's my point, actually. That this whole idea of I just lack a belief is just fucking retarded because it can be applied to things.
It's
that
not.
Don't.
It's not. I mean, like, look, you
Okay,
can say
listen,
you can
listen,
look at
listen.
anything. You can look at anything like that, right?
Baseline. If you think it's retarded to call a rock an atheist, then this definition of atheism that you just quote unquote lack a belief is also retarded because it would
because
it would include rocks.
No, it's something like you have to be able to hold a belief, right? I would say like you have to be able to discern information because you're making a claim. You're making an assessment on information. So if you can't
exactly. You're
do
making
that,
an
then it
assessment
wouldn't
on
then
information
it wouldn't occur
to
to you.
come to a conclusion. You have an attitude as to the likelihood of a proposition being true.
Mhm.
That's
Right.
my definition.
Right. So I mean, when we're okay, whatever. When we're saying, I think we both agree here, but for some reason, whatever. The point is
I
like an
certainly would
atheist is
never-
someone.
I would never advocate for the lack of belief definition of atheism because it's just fucking stupid.
Well, I mean, it's stupid if you
have
get
to,
like
like,
super
you
crazy
have
about it
to
and say like,
come-
well, rocks don't believe in anything,
Yeah, well,
things
that's
without a
valid-
mind.
that is
Obviously, I would
that
say
is a
like
completely
you have to have a
valid-
mind or the ability
that's a completely valid
to
challenge that
process
definition,
information to
yes.
even matter in this instance,
Yeah,
right?
that is a
So I could
completely-
say all rocks are vegetarian too.
Yeah. Well, no,
and
you
I
can't
mean,
because at
so
least
what?
vegetarians
Like-
proactively eat certain things, right?
It,
And they
well, if we
believe
define
things about
if we
their
define
particular
vegetarian
ethos.
as someone who excludes meat from their diet,
I wouldn't.
then just everyone who doesn't, yeah, you're that's the point I'm making. Not everything that excludes meat is a vegetarian, just like not everyone
so
who doesn't
that would
hold
be a
that
really
position
bad
is an atheist.
definition of vegetarianism. So there you go.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, but it's like sort of like saying like,
What is the
rocks
point of
are
a definition?
apolitical.
What is
right?
the point of a definition?
Rocks are apolitical. It depends, but it's usually to describe like what something means or how it's used.
How it's used, yes.
Mhm.
And it's used, and specifically our goal when it comes to defining something, ontologically speaking, philosophically speaking, is to minimize the exceptions while encompassing all the things that we're actually referring to. So when you define
For
things so incredibly broadly, that's bad defining.
For the purpose of this conversation, I'm going to use atheist, and you tell me if you have a problem with this, to mean a human who doesn't find the evidence for God compelling, who doesn't believe in the proposition of God.
I find that to be a horrible definition
Why?
because that presumes all atheists know what all the evidence is.
No, it just means that of the evidence they've heard, they don't believe it.
Okay,
Not
so
every
you're adding
atheist
more
is going
to
to
it.
have knowledge of, like I said, people can be atheists for bad or good reasons before this.
Yeah, so my definition is what I'm going to go ahead and stick with. An atheist is somebody who is at least over 50% certain that a God doesn't exist.
Okay, what? Okay.
I think that
Uh,
encapsulates everybody who calls themselves an atheist, and it excludes everything that we wouldn't normally call an atheist. Yes, I think that's the best definition.
Okay, that's fine. We can go with that. It really is like if you don't see the evidence, right? Let's talk about the good reason to be an atheist again, because I think like we're getting caught up in something.
Sure,
But
which most people don't know.
it doesn't matter what most people think or whatever. Just you and I talking, we both agree. I think we both have consensus on there's a good reason to be an atheist and there are bad reasons to be an atheist.
Yeah,
And that there are like logical, rational reasons to be an atheist, right?
sure.
And that's by evaluating the arguments or evidence for God and finding that it's not satisfactory.
Again, not satisfactory. Nah, I don't really buy that.
How so? What I'm saying like
Because
someone
you can
who
have not enough evidence to believe something, but still believe something based off of like some sort of trust that something is the case. I mean, people do it literally every fucking day.
right, but you shouldn't believe in things necessarily for that. Like,
You do.
right? I believe in give me an example.
Like, for instance, the amount of male Christians that exist. Back in
Mhm.
the year 2000, it was about 47%. And then there was like there was like a drop for a little bit, and then it kind of plateaued. And then as of recent, it's shot back up to 47%. Now, your conclusion is that one of the likely reasons for this is because of the advent of Nick Fuentes and Andrew Tate. Now, you don't have any evidence for that. You don't
Not
have any real
necessarily,
reason
no.
to believe
That
that,
oh,
but
you're giving an example, or are you trying
yeah,
to
I'm
say what
giving
my
an
position
example.
is?
I'm giving you
Oh,
an
okay,
example.
go ahead. Yep.
You don't have any evidence of that. You don't really have any reason to believe that, but you know, it's something that seems plausible to you. So sure, why not?
Well, you could like interrogate that a little more, and you could say like, well, Nick Fuentes preaches Christianity or a type of Christianity, and his audience is of the same demographic that's becoming more religious, and look at what's being put into the zeitgeist to be consumed by people in that demographic.
Yeah,
So if that one
would
demographic
right.
is becoming religious, it could be possibly because other people are doing that. I wouldn't say like
Yeah.
that's the reason why. We would have to investigate it more,
At that,
but we can see
as you
right.
pointed out, even with all that information, we wouldn't be able to come to the conclusion that it's because of him in any one particular sense.
It wouldn't be because of any one person. I wouldn't say that, but you can see like how these things add up to a zeitgeist, and you can say like, well, because the specific subculture that targets this one demographic is trying to push this ideal, and we can see the way that these sort of like propaganda campaigns for whatever ideologies have been more or less successful, depending on various factors or whatever. We can look at cultural reasons for that. So I mean, there are ways, like there are like sociologists and stuff who will like specifically try to find that out and try to develop a science
let me see if I
around
can't help
answering
move
these
this
questions.
conversation along to something more productive. So I think what you're trying to say is that the main reason why people are religious is because they believe something that they have no good reason to believe. And when you believe something
Correct.
that you have no good reason to believe, that's a bad thing because it means that you're liable to believe other things that you have no good reason to believe, and that can lead to all
Not only that,
personal
like
horrible
that's
things.
taking it to an extra step, but yeah, I do agree with that. But like even at that first part, right? You believe in something that you don't have a good reason to believe. And that really is my main fundamental criticism of
Okay.
religion and society. It's that it's better, it's an irrational belief because we don't have a good reason
Categorically,
for
no.
it. Okay. Um
I don't think it's an irrational thing to believe in a god.
you don't think that I mean, if it doesn't logic, it's unreasonable. Would you say that?
No.
Okay. In what circumstance would belief in a god be reasonable?
In the circumstance that you have a reasonable reason to believe,
Like what would be an example of that?
an argument that you find plausible true.
Right, but that argument can be reasonable or unreasonable, rational or irrational, strong or weak, right?
Sure.
Okay. And what is an example of a strong or cogent argument for God?
Well, I mean,
Like you would have to provide that
there's-
example to
there's
to
a
refute,
couple.
to argue with what I'm
There's a
saying
couple
here.
out there that I don't.
Okay,
think that
give
there's
the
any
best
reason.
one.
Do you know what the evolutionary argument against naturalism is?
No.
It's an Alvin Plantinga argument where essentially he points out the absolute facts of the matter, and these are just inarguable facts, that if we take naturalism to be true, and if we take evolution to be true, which we do, then evolution does not, as we know, choose for truth in terms of its evolutionary pathways. What it does is it chooses for survival. Therefore, if we are strictly naturalist, we have to accept the fact that our brains are unreliable in the sense that they have been evolved specifically not to seek truth, but to survive as a priority.
I mean, that is sort of, I know, well, you can say like it's not one or the other necessarily, but we are more prone to find like illogical, like not necessarily logical, but irrational patterns we shouldn't find in things sometimes because we have pattern seeking brains because of evolved to survive in certain circumstances that might not be as applicable as they are today.
Sure.
But I think like finding truth is a part of that. Like the human brain has incredible potential to reason and to discover truth.
You can
and
make that point, but you can't really prove it,
right.
which is why the argument
And you can argue, I mean, well, you can argue by our ability to like search for truth and all the different mechanisms we have, the things we've uncovered about the world, you know, in that quest for truth. You can see like people do have, at least some people do have a search for truth in them, right? That's innate to them. And you could also argue that having a brain that seeks truth gives you a better
I think there's
position.
definitely people who try more often than not than on average, but like I don't think there's a single person who has like an instinctual desire to know what is true and only what is true. Oh, yeah, that's true.
Especially in the case where knowing what is true is what helps you survive.
Those can coalesce, but
there are a lot of cases
as
like
we
that.
both know. That is not. There are cases in which that is definitely not the case.
Okay, sure, but I'm just saying like that is also a part of the human mind is that we do search for truth, and that these patterns and these logical processes do lead us to
waved away as accidental.
I mean, when you well, it's not none of it is accidental or intentional. It's if we're talking about evolution, right? If we're talking about the way we evolved, that's not guided by like.
This would be a better way to put it.
I mean, maybe, but I mean,
this argument has been had, by the way, in like plenty of different. Like,
look, you can say, hold on. You can say that every. Hold on, Lundy. Let me. I want to make this point though. You can say that any animal, right? That has survived, their brains are evolved to help them survive, right? Okay, but some animals are better than other animals at like problem solving, right?
Sure.
Okay, so those animals that are better at problem solving, their brains have evolved to make them more akin to that than to not doing that, right? To make them do that more than less.
Sure.
Right? So like certain animals with bigger brains are able to problem solve more. Their brains have evolved to problem solve and not just be on survival mode or whatever. Like there's more intelligent ways of surviving.
Sure.
That different, right? Because every animal, their brain has evolved to help them survive.
Yeah, that's intrinsic to the argument. Yeah.
So, but I mean, like humans are a distinction from. Well, every species of animal is a distinction from the other species of animals, and different animals have evolved to be specialized in certain things. But the human brain has evolved to be more specialized for seeking the truth, for logic, for reason, for mathematics, you know, for using tools. We've evolved to be more of that, to be more conscious than to just, you know, basic survival instinct, I think.
Doesn't mean it's necessarily reliable in doing so, though.
It's not always reliable, but I'm saying like our brains have evolved for like with that ability to be more like that than just
so long as
you know. And I also reject the notion that our brains you know helped us survive, not discover what's true. It could be that they've done both.
Don't go into a place that I didn't go. Nobody said that our brains were specifically evolved not to determine what's true.
Okay, but what you're trying to say is that determining what over truth.
No, just to prioritize. Well, yes, that truth is like lower down on the totem pole of priorities, evolutionary speaking.
Do you think? Well, yeah, because evolutionary speaking, all you care about is surviving when you're talking about evolution and propagating your genes, right?
Yeah,
that's the driving force. So I don't know why, like, what is the point of that? Like, how does that invalidate that humans have evolved with these truth-seeking minds, or the ability at least to have them?
Ways of viewing the world, like for instance, in a dualistic or God-believing way, that could solve the problem for you. That could make more sense of the world.
Why would that make more sense of the world?
Well, I think the adherents to this, and Plantinga himself would probably say that access to like a god of some particular sort who wants you to know things that are true would allow for your ability to rely on your senses and whatnot, in the sense that you'd be able to come to things that are true. And that makes more
Well,
sense than thinking that natural processes did what they did.
that that doesn't make more
And
sense.
okay,
It could be that relying on what's like relying to find what's true is what helped you survive, and that's why
right.
the
See
animals
how
with the
your
biggest
all
brains
your counters to
evolved
this are,
to.
it could be, it might be this, it
Well,
could
that's
be.
all you're saying, right? Like that's, but
Yeah,
you're actually inventing characters in your could be, right? Because you have to invent God and this sort of rationalism that exists exterior to the human experience, like the human mind, and sort of like it makes more sense
it
that
presents
God
an
wants you
option
to.
for you that makes
So
it presents an option for you that makes sense of the world in light of believing that naturalism does not necessarily lead to truth.
I mean, so I mean, well, naturalism, like evolution, let's say, isn't really about leading to truth. It's just explaining how
Exactly.
like
Yeah.
life
That is the
diversified,
point.
right?
Yes.
Okay. So, but why would you expect that to, I don't get like what would you expect that to say about the issue of whether there's a God or not? And why
People
would
find
the
God to be an
I just
easier
don't
way
like
to parse that.
why is it more hold on. We have we have examples, okay? We know we pretty much know, right? That the traits that we have survived the process of evolution, been produced by evolution, right? And evolution selects for what helps people survive, right?
Again, I'm going to go ahead and
So,
let us move forward here. So let me go ahead and
well, no,
just
hold on,
now,
hold
because
on. I want
I
to.
understand the point you're trying to make is that there is no
What's the
quote
point I'm
unquote
trying to make?
there is no at the end of the day there is no quote unquote good argument that establishes that a God exists.
Right. Well, it's
There also
reasonable
is
to
no
believe in
good
God. So.
argument. There also is no good argument to establish that you shouldn't believe in God. So the
Yeah,
point
there. I
here,
mean, the argument.
so the point here
Right.
is that there is vast amounts of reasons that people believe, and to call them all categorically irrational is baseless.
I'm saying the proposition itself is irrational. So whether or not,
Okay,
I mean,
well, that's
someone could
something you
not.
can't prove. So we'll move on.
Well, you could. I mean, let's work it out, right? Like let's
You
let's
can
try to
but
figure out a
you can
rational
try, but
reason
people have
for
been trying
believing
for
in it.
2,000 years, Alki. You're not going to be the one to do it.
So they and you're saying they haven't found a good reason, a rational reason for 2000, probably longer than
They
that.
have not found a good reason. Well, sorry. They have not found any proof that not believing in a God is the rational position.
You're ascribing like a positivity to this that isn't there. Like you're saying
I'm
not
ascribing a
believing in God.
positivity to it because there is a positivity to it. Because every atheist is someone who is over 50% certain that a God doesn't exist. That is what atheism
Okay, you
is.
understand that like not like actively disbelieving in something and
Yes.
then not accepting a premise are separate things, right? Sort of like you're not actively disbelieving, like you just haven't seen evidence to suggest a thing is true, right? You're not actively disbelieving in the
Sure.
like it's not something you're right.
In that instance, if we're
It's
saying
a
that,
it's
if
a
we're saying
negative
that it is
proposition.
rational to reject anything that we don't believe there is a reasonable reason to believe is true.
It's about like there's no good reason to believe in something. So you can't to believe in something without a good reason is not reasonable, right? It's by definition it's not
You
reasonable.
have no reason to believe that's the case for all religious people, or even most religious people.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm talking about the proposition itself. Forget about like the individual people or the reasons they have. What you're saying is that disbelief and there's nothing that's ever proven that there is no God, basically, or that there's a good reason to not believe in a God. And I would say that you should not believe in anything without a good reason too. And if a good reason lacks for any proposition, you should disbelieve it unless you have a good reason to believe
What's
it.
good reason?
Or there's
mean to
some
you?
I'm sorry.
What's good reason mean to you to believe something?
I mean, like if something is like logically undeniable or there's strong empirical evidence for it,
Or
I would say.
so the only things that you believe are things that you have logically deduced to be the case, or that you have lots of evidence for.
I mean, I sort of live my life without belief in a lot of ways, but if you're talking
I don't
about,
think that's true, because I have heard you in this particular Discord say a multitude of things that you have no evidence for, that you have not logically deduced, that you have no issue just saying is probably the case.
well, I mean, like I may speculate on a position or something, and if it turns out not to be the case, then or there's a better argument for it, I'll just change that assumption or whatever because it wasn't a good, if my assumption wasn't
Right,
good,
and
then I'll
since
just
there
change
has
it or
been
whatever.
and since there has been
But like I don't
absolutely no
have, but I
argument
don't
to
have
say
like a
that
certain like
one should not
loyalty
believe
to
in
that
God,
assumption, and I don't accept that assumption as like absolute fact,
and
basically.
since there has
So like,
been no argument to say that one should not believe in God, that's logically like bulletproof in any one particular sense, then people can believe in God.
well, no, well, the
And
argument, I mean, they
and
could.
if an
The
argument
argument
comes
is
and if an
the
argument
argument
comes
is by
along that
definition
compels
that
them to
this
stop,
positive
then that's
claim, hold
fine.
on, this positive claim doesn't have proper evidence to support it, so you shouldn't accept it because it doesn't have evidence. So its lack of evidence is the reason to not believe in it. That's not
Or
the case. Yeah.
you think that it all lacks evidence or it all lacks logic, but like you don't know that.
I mean, you tried to give me one example of a reasonable
Yeah,
reason
your
to
only
believe in
argument
God, which,
was, well, maybe that's not true, which is just ridiculous.
no, that's not that's not what I said. That's not what I said. I said that the argument doesn't work because it doesn't really because the God that it assumes, there's no reason to assume that. Because we can see plenty of evolutionary reasons why our minds would be truth seeking, right?
No, we can't.
Because that would help us survive. So
Because that's not how evolution works, as you've already admitted.
no,
Evolution
but
is
right, no,
entirely
because
survival-based.
the truth seeking is incidental to the
As you
survival.
and I both know,
That's what
there's
we
loads of
said.
people who have
Hold
loads
on,
of
we said the
truth
truth seeking is incidental to the
goodness.
survival.
Yeah, so you haven't given
Okay.
any actual like rebuttal to that argument that actually debunks it. So we're gonna go ahead and move on because you're just gonna keep repeating.
Well, I've
yourself.
just it's not a good argument because it's
Yeah, I know
not
you
like
don't think it's a good argument, but you haven't properly rebutted it. You haven't shown that it's illogical. You haven't shown any sort of fallacies. You haven't rebutted the factual nature of it in any one particular sense.
what
so
it's
we're
sort
gonna
of a
have to
God
just
of the
move
gaps
on.
fallacy, isn't it?
No, it's not. It's specifically
Yeah, it
saying,
is.
it's
It is.
specifically saying
If you're
that you
saying
necessarily, as a result of this particular philosophy, lack a mechanism that necessarily calls for truth. Therefore, there are other options that you could potentially go to that might make more sense of the world. So that's entirely
right,
plausible.
but
I'm not
we don't
saying
lack
I am not saying that this is a logically bulletproof argument for doing so, but it's reasonable.
yeah, I mean it's not reasonable
Okay,
because
well, you haven't shown that.
it is
So unless you're
right.
just gonna
Okay.
say a new point to try and debunk it, we should just move on.
No, we're gonna go over it and you're gonna tell me exactly where this breaks down, okay?
You're not gonna be able to break it down.
Our minds no, where my argument breaks down, that's what you're gonna say.
Okay.
Our minds evolved to survive, right?
Yes.
There are some humans, probably every human in some capacity, that's able to discern truth or that wants to know what's true, right?
Sure.
Okay. That behavior is from evolution, right?
Prove that.
We evolved to have that
Prove
behavior
that.
because we evolved to have every behavior.
No. Well, so you say. We didn't evolve.
You don't
to
believe that?
have
But
particular
hold on.
behaviors. We had incidental things that happened. Like, do you think we evolved to have a pinky, or did we just so happen to have? One?
Okay.
And
You're thinking of. I think you're thinking when I say
not-
evolved to, I mean
Yeah,
we evolved
so-
not in order to have something, but we evolved, and in the process of evolving, we developed it.
We evolved
evolved
the
to
capacity to maybe find truth. Maybe is what you're trying to say, because we do find truth. Therefore, we must have evolved to do so.
Well, we may have found truth, but we may have found truth. The point is like that's part of our evolution, and that had some advantageous thing to help us survive, right? Our pattern seeking minds finding truth had some advantage to help us survive. That could be that's just from what we know from evolution. That's why we have all of our traits, including that trait.
How do you know that that's not just a survival mechanism for you?
It could be. Why would that even matter?
Then you haven't rebutted the argument.
You had no, because I'm saying like what he's saying that we have, right? The search for truth or whatever that's in humans, the human ability to look for truth. If that evolved because it helps us survive, that's the reason we have it, versus it's because there's a conscious God that gives us that.
Great, prove that.
Well, so the reason it's because we know that our traits evolved from evolution, right? Our behaviors are expressed like from our genetics.
Could simply be incidental.
Right, so
It could simply be that it wasn't deleterious.
Well, it doesn't
to
matter
us.
if it's incidental or not. That's the reason why
It
things.
does matter. If
That's
it's
the reason
incidental,
why.
because if the fact of the matter is that even what you're saying right now and your reasoning for being able to come to that particular conclusion is just something that the survival mechanisms in your evolutionarily created brain has pieced together in order to defend your ability to discern truth, then all that means is that you can't trust even that. So what you're doing, what you need to do is you need to demonstrate that the argument itself, the two premises, that naturalism, if we presume naturalism to be true, and we believe that evolution is primarily caused by survival mechanisms and the perpetuation of those survival mechanisms, then survival is not necessarily something that codes on to truth. Therefore, our brains have not evolved to be reliable in terms of seeking truth.
Right. Sometimes they're not.
They're okay. Then you agree with
Right.
The
Sometimes they are, and sometimes they're not.
With the argument. So we're moving on.
Anyways, I'm gonna make the point that like that you have the evolutionary, human behaviors that evolve from a long process of evolution
all of this very
through natural
boring
selection
because, like,
through
it's
millions
not
of
even,
years,
like,
right?
It's not even like 90% of what I prepared to do. Like
We-
it's all very boring.
We have we have an example of that, right? We have evidence for that. We don't have evidence.
Let me just go ahead and
of
give you
an-
this for the sake of argument. Let's just say that most religious people do not have a good reason to be religious.
Okay.
Well, I'll just say that so we can
Okay.
move on.
All right. My argument is that belief is unreasonable or irrational. It is the opposite of
Along with
truth
basically
seeking,
the
right?
along with
that-
loads of
that's
beliefs
my-
that literally every single person in the world has. So it's not really all
it's
that
not-
unique in that regard. So who cares?
Okay. Is it possible for like a rational person to have an irrational belief?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, that's all I'm saying. And
Yeah.
that specific belief is irrational. That's my point. I'm
And-
not
and
saying
my- and
every
my- and
religious
my-
person is an irrational
And
person.
my point is that literally
Overall.
everybody has irrational beliefs.
I mean, that may be so. That doesn't mean that those, they're not justified in
So
doing so.
therefore-
It could be that
therefore-
everyone has some.
So therefore, getting rid of that particular irrational belief, even if you want to
Mhm.
call it that, doesn't do anything for us.
It could absolutely do something for us. But
No,
what I'm
it
saying is
doesn't, no.
I think getting rid of all irrational beliefs is probably a good thing in the long run.
Okay, well that'll never happen. So let's just keep it to reality.
Sure. Well, Well, whatever. I'm saying like the less irrationality in the general population, the better would be my argument. And religious thinking,
Okay, well you're always going to have
Taking things on
rationality in the
faith.
general public, and as you have already
Right, but
as
you
you
can-
have already made very clear, rational people can hold an irrational belief, and in fact, literally that's the case for all people. Therefore, religion is not really all that special. So getting rid of it does nothing for us.
it is special because not every. Hold on. Are you saying that every irrational belief is the same? They don't have different effects, or they're
I think if you have an
What?
irrational belief, that itself says nothing about you.
okay. There's a specific type of irrationality when it comes to religion, I would argue, which I can argue that in a minute. But
Okay.
the main point I
Move to
want to
that
make for the
argument.
purpose of this debate. I'm sorry.
Move to that argument. That's
Well, the
religion is
main
a
point I want to make.
particular type of
my main
irrationality that we can separate.
The
from
main
all other
reason I
forms of
feel-
irrationality that is really bad that we need to get rid of.
The main reason I feel that religion is bad for society is because it promotes irrational thinking overall. And you see that that's it. That's my argument is
Okay.
that
Well,
this
we've
is
already-
a
we've already
negative
discussed
thing
the
for.
premises necessary in order to say that that's not even true. So
What do you mean? I thought you
Yeah,
conceded that point.
no, because you accept that rational people can have irrational beliefs. So it doesn't mean
Right.
anything.
And I would say like even any irrational belief over a large enough audience is a bad thing, right? In the general
Any
population is a
irrational
bad thing.
belief,
It's bad
including the
for
belief that
it's
people are
bad for
generally good.
society to it's bad for society
Yeah,
to
it's
have
bad for
irrational
society
beliefs.
It's bad for society to believe that people are generally good. It's bad for society to have high trust when you don't have a whole lot of reason to. You don't have the evidence. You haven't had a logical argument.
It depends. Hold
There's
on.
loads
Those are
of
all
irrational
separate
beliefs, and
things.
it's actually perfectly fine for people to believe is true. Loads of people have no good reason to believe that murder is evil in any real sense. They haven't heard the fucking philosophical arguments for why we should be moral in any one particular sense. They haven't fucking read up on all that shit. So
Okay, how
you
about-
would agree that they believe it irrationally.
Hold
But
on.
it's still a
What
good
about the
thing that
idea-
they're against murder, right?
It's not irrational at all. What if
It
the
is very
idea that
much
you don't want to
irrational.
live in a society where murder is prevalent because you could get murdered or someone you care about could get murdered, right? because it would make things unsafe for the tribe you're in if there's murder going
You can
on.
try and create rational reasons why people generally believe that
That's a
murder is wrong.
that's a reasonable
But-
reason to believe that murder
but you
is
have
not
to,
desirable.
you must
Like,
concede the fact that loads of people believe all sorts of very good things that we want them to believe for irrational reasons. You have to concede that. That's just true.
no, I mean, I would say, like, if someone incidentally believes in a good thing for an irrational reason, I would want them to understand, like, the rational reason for why they should
Okay,
accept
that's
that
never going
thing.
to happen in society.
Like, there's a
Stephen. It's not
difference
gonna
too
happen
between
across all of
believing in.
human beings, so we're going to have to
There's
move
a-
on that.
It doesn't matter if it will or will not happen.
Listen,
I'm
I
talking
want
about, like, what
everybody to
ought
be
to
fully read on every single scientific subject and every single philosophical subject, and to the point that all of them
Okay.
can contribute to all the various different academics' writings in every single particular subject, and that we're all capable
Mm-hmm.
of fucking subsistence living on our own, and we can all do everything in order to survive on our own, so we don't require a government, and we're all perfectly rational and mindful and moral beings, and understand all the underpinnings as to how those things work.
Uh-huh.
I would love for that to be the case. I would love for us to live in gay space communism utopia land, but we don't. So why don't we go ahead and talk about things that are real?
I mean, well, like, isn't that the project we're trying to work towards? Some sort of more utopian
because
vision
I'm
than
not
what we
fucking
currently live
retarded.
in? Okay, yeah, I mean, I think it's ridiculous to think that things don't improve over time, especially
Of
when we
course,
look
things
at,
improve over time.
like, the course of human history.
Who cares?
We can see
you know,
also
one of the
when
main
if we're
reasons
talking
why
about,
things improve over time? Religion.
you don't have. Okay, make your case for that.
Sure. Well, you've already conceded the fact that the people who have fought against all the bad things that have pushed us forward in future, at the slave abolitionists, the civil rights people, just generally.
No,
speaking,
I conceded the exact opposite of that. Actually, remember when I went through and I read all the atheists who were part of the civil rights movement? So no, I don't concede to that at all. And I would also concede that a lot of people who stood up to those things couldn't be out atheists at the time, but we have no reason to. Yeah,
all
that's what I would
all
say.
the Christians who are doing good things, they're all secret atheists. I get you.
My argument is not that Christians can't do good things.
Yeah,
My argument is
exactly.
that-
So
is
why
not
don't
that
you go?
Christians
So why
can't
don't you
do
go
good
ahead and
things.
stop saying that you didn't
Yeah.
concede something that you totally fucking conceded, which is the fact that Christians are the people who have, in general, as far as the United States is concerned, pushed us forward in terms of social progress. So that is true. We accepted
I
that.
wouldn't concede that, and I would say that,
well,
if
you
that
don't have a
happens,
good
it's-
reason to believe that to not concede that. You have no good reason to believe that's not the case. You have every good reason to believe that is the case. So we're just going to go ahead and
well,
move
I mean,
on from your
like, everyone was
irrationality. You're
Christian
being-
at a certain
you're
point, or
being
at least
irrational
publicly
right now.
identified
You're
as
being-
Christian.
You don't
right?
have evidence. You don't have a logical argument. So you're just being
You're the
irrational.
one. Hold
right
on.
now.
You're the one making the claim,
Yeah,
right?
and this is true.
It's true that
Who was the most
people,
important person in the Civil Rights Act era?
because the most important person was a reverend. That means that
How many
only
people
reli-
followed him who were religious?
probably a lot.
Put a percentage on it.
I have no idea.
You don't think it was probably
Majority.
I don't know, the vast majority? I think that might be safe to say.
Yeah, because the majority of
Gotcha.
people were religious,
Okay,
and it was
so
a
again,
movement
you
that was
conceded my
largely in the
point, so
South
we're
as
gonna move
well.
forward from that. So, with you conceding the fact that religious people are the reason why we've been able to move forward socially in the West, so that's one good thing that religion has done.
Hold
We
on.
concede the fact that religion
That's
is
not- that-
irrational. And
stop.
Shouldn't be irrational. Therefore, they shouldn't be religious. Even if we concede all of that, we accept the fact that irrational beliefs have brought us forward into a point in time in which we prefer over the point in time in which we were. So, we can move forward from that. Now, the reason why all this stuff is very important.
I would argue that it is, like, a lot more to do too with the secularization of things, and the more, like, if you really look at, like, the Enlightenment and these big leaps forward we took, it was a time of
You
a
wanna
lot
talk
of
about the
atheist
Enlightenment?
movement.
Let's talk about
A lot of
Enlightenment.
a lot of religious extremism was, like, lessened. The role of the church in society was lessened. People were becoming more irreligious. A lot of people were deists around those times. So, I mean, like, you know,
still-
like, you
yeah,
can,
you still
like,
call that irrational.
so
by
what
the
I
way,
would say to
so I
that
don't
is,
know why
like, well,
you're
the
making
majority of people
separation
in all
there.
of human history have been religious, right?
Yeah.
Or at least in recorded history.
Yeah. Therefore, it is reasonable to say
Okay.
that the people who have brought us forward have
What
been
about all-
generally religious.
What
people.
about all the times that religious people led to worse outcomes or worse societies or more oppression or
Sure.
whatever?
Who are the
You know,
people
like,
who are going against
saying
those
that
people?
because these people who did this good thing were
Who are the
religious.
people who are going against those people?
In which instance?
Majority, any instance. Think of one that you're thinking of right now, and the examples you're given. Who are the people who primarily fought against those people?
I mean, it depends.
Give me a for instance in which you believe that the people who were fighting against the wrongs and evils of religion were majoritively or primarily non-religious people, or at least atheistic.
Yeah. Okay. No. Right. So I don't believe that. Right.
Okay,
Because I
good.
don't know.
Then you
I don't
agree with
have
me,
that
and you can see the
information.
argument. Good.
But it's the same. But it's the same thing to say like that doesn't say that religion specifically is what leads to that, because
Oh,
religion can lead
really?
to both negative and
Is that
bad
the
things.
case?
Yeah.
Because guess what? That's a
Really.
real bad problem for you.
Like you can say that
That is a
scientific
horrible
progress
problem
is what
for
leads
you.
to that, right?
That is a real
Or you
big
can say
problem
that.
for you, buddy. You know why that's a real
Why is
big
it a big
problem for
problem?
you? Because now you have to
Why?
concede that all the bad things that religion has done is not because of religion, or at least not necessarily.
I would say that it's because of individual people's belief in religion.
Okay, so it's because of
Or-
individual
or
people's
use
belief
of
in
religion.
that we've been able to move forward as a society. Then,
In some cases, yeah, but when you're talking about moving forward,
in every
like
case in which the religious people who were trying to make the world a worse place were trying to do that, the people who were fighting against them were other individuals who were religious, who believed in their religion that caused them to then fight against those people. If you want to say
So-
that's not necessarily the case, that religion can
So-
cause people to do good things, then it's also not necessarily the case.
I never said that. I said that
you,
it
you
could.
literally said that.
No, I said religion could cause people to do good things.
But
What I
yeah,
said
yeah.
was that things
Yeah,
like
your point
hold
was
on,
to
the
try
leap
and deplete
forward in
my point
humanity
by
has a
saying
lot
that.
to do. Hold on,
Yeah.
Lindy. The leap forwards in humanity and civilization have a lot too to do with things like agriculture and technological advancement, which you can
Led
argue,
by
well,
religious people.
there was a religious person who pioneered that or whatever, but that doesn't mean that that happened
I would
as a
say
result of the religion, right? Like every scientific
Great,
discovery
then,
or whatever.
And every bad thing that's ever happened, you can say, is not really is not necessarily because of religion.
I wouldn't blame the religion specifically, but you can see the way that religion
Or
is
just
utilized
religion
and
as a whole, or just religion the concept. If you're going to not give religion credit when religious people push us forward in society, then you can't give it credit when it pushes us backwards. You can't. You got to take them both.
Well, if you accept the premise that religious belief is fundamentally irrational or has a certain set of like values that it instills in people, you can see like at certain times there are societies that give into those qualities, and there are certain times that they're in society where people fight against those
I think
qualities,
it's
right?
reasonable to say
And
that if
even
those
though
people weren't religious,
they
they'd still
may
be doing
be
the same shit.
I'm sorry.
I think it's reasonable to say that in every society in which religious people are doing evil things or have done evil things, you could quite easily say that if they weren't religious, they'd still be doing the same, if not similar shit.
I think it depends.
Ah.
Possibly. It could be, it could be an opiate of the masses thing, I think, more often than not, where like the people who are truly evil maybe aren't even religious, but they're using religion in a way that's evil, I would say, as a way to oppress. Yeah.
Okay.
So, I mean, it's not necessarily that individual religious people or irreligious people are behaving good or bad on an individual level. It's the mechanisms required for belief of a irrational claim, I think, overall are bad for society.
Okay.
And if we look at the modern day now,
Uh-huh.
we can see like how,
Yeah.
if,
Evangelicals,
we
those
can look at,
motherfuckers.
well, sure, evangelicals, but not just evangelicals, right?
You know who primarily
you
fights
can
against them,
look
by
at-
the way?
Who?
Protestants.
A lot of people. Okay. Yeah, but so do atheists, right? And so do Muslims, and so
Yeah,
do
and some
Jewish
atheists
people.
are actually on the side of the evil people, too. Some atheists are on the side of the
Yeah,
evangelicals. They're
we
like, yeah, you guys are
already
based.
talked about that. I'm aware.
Yeah.
I'm aware of that.
So,
I'm
as we've
aware.
established,
But what
atheists
I'm
can be
saying
both
is-
good and can be both rational and irrational. Religious people can be
Yes.
Religious people are all irrational, but they can also
Right.
lead us
No,
to
no.
being good, to
Nope,
doing good things.
Not what I said. You're totally not even. So again, I'll
That
go
is-
over this
that is
again
nec-
because I said
logically
I
necessary
said that
inherently
holding
in
one
your position.
irrational position does not make you wholly irrational. So you could irrationally have a religious belief and still be rational in other parts of your life,
Okay.
and you can rationally have come to the conclusion that there's no good reason to believe in God, or you can be an atheist for irrational reasons, right? We talked about good and bad reasons to be an atheist,
Uh-huh.
and behave irrationally or maliciously or whatever
Mhm.
as a malevolent force in society, even though you're correct about one rational position, right?
Uh-huh.
So we already covered that. So you're trying to straw man into something
haven't
that I didn't
strawmanned
say.
anything. You said that they
You
are.
you are
They are irrational, at least in the sense that they are religious, right?
correct.
Okay, that's all I said. Anyways, we're going to go ahead and move on to the Enlightenment, because I think a really important part of the Enlightenment was definitely the French Revolution. How much do you know about the French Revolution?
The French Revolution was after the Enlightenment.
I know.
The Enlightenment was like the. How much do I know? I know about the Reign of Terror and like them killing all the clergy.
Do you know who Chesterton was? Do you know who the Marquis de Condorcet it was? Do you know who Edmund Burke was?
No.
Okay. So I'm going to tell you a little story here. So,
Okay.
French Revolution was primarily inspired by thinkers who were either from or inspired by the Enlightenment period, which was longer than just like a small period of time, by the way. It's a long period of
It
time.
was from
So
the
to say that
1600s to the mid 1700s.
yeah, so the French Revolution was inspired primarily by people who believed in all the Enlightenment values that we ascribe to our founding fathers and things like that, and into the general Enlightenment period. Now, there were some people who were still in support of the French Revolution who were a little cautious and a little nervous about the fervor by which people wanted to have this particular revolution. And they had particular reasons for this. Now, Chesterton was a gentleman. I forget his first name, but he's a big fat fella. Very jolly. We love fat people here. Who came up with the thought process that he encouraged other people to adopt called the Chesterton's fence thought process, which is the notion that when you come across a fence, before you decide to knock it down, take a little thought to think about why it's there in the first place. A very important concept that I think a lot of revolutionaries tend to be a little dismissive of in a way that can bring about a lot of chaos. Now, beyond that, there were other thinkers like Edmund Burke or the Marquis de Condorcet who made the point very specifically that not all of the hierarchical traditions and whatnot serve no purpose. They were fighting back against the purely anarchistic idea that all of the institutions of France at the time needed to be torn down. The hierarchies of the nobility, the hierarchies of the kingship, the hierarchies of the church, like all of it just needed to be burned down. And they said, well, stop and think for a second. The reason why they said that primarily, hold on, I have an actual like sort of general summarization.
How many atheists died in the Rhine, guys?
The reason they said that primarily was because there was an argument about traditions. That's traditions and long-standing institutions preserve accumulated social wisdom that ordinary individuals can't just reinvent from scratch. Religious traditions historically provided moral education, communal identity, ethical norms, meaning, social cohesion for the entirety of the civilization. And the French Revolution, after it happened, after they burned down everything, and after they said, let's get away from this institutionalized church bullshit, demonstrated that simply tearing it all down and trying to create your own thing out of whole cloth just does not fucking work. In fact, it leads to all manner of different types of other much more irrational behaviors like tribalism and fanaticism and ideological extremism and all these sorts of things that led to a lot of French people just straight up fucking murdering each other. So, with that in mind, the Enlightenment thinkers were actually in favor of preserving institutions that they felt were useful in the ways in which they were. It didn't necessarily need to be the case that the church was ultimately correct about everything that it said, but so long as it served many other sort of functions, like providing some generalized moral education to the common people who are never going to crack open a philosophy book to save their fucking lives, or a communal identity, which allows people to connect with each other, which allows people to remember that they are a part of a community that they are responsible for and that they have certain obligations to because we all are in this together. Ethical norms, basic meaning, something that can paralyze an individual if they don't have any in their life. Provides something along those particular lines, and general social cohesion. If it provides these sorts of things to society, then maybe it's best not to simply tear it down and do away with it entirely unless you have something that can replace it for all of those various different purposes. And atheism, as you have advocated that everybody ought to be, and that would make everything better if everyone was, at least a little bit, just doesn't have any replacements for those things.
It's not designed to, but I mean, secular
know.
humanism does, but atheism
It
itself
doesn't.
doesn't and shouldn't, because that's not even what it's answering.
Secular humanism
I want
doesn't
to respond
have
to a
any
couple things you said, though.
Okay.
Okay, first of all, yeah, tearing everything down is obviously not going to lead to a stable society. It's going to cause society to fall apart. Um, this would be a transition that happens organically. It would be from individual people having to make the decision over time to become more irreligious, which I think has happened, has borne out overall over the last several centuries. We've seen people grow irreligious not because of institutional reasons or compulsory reasons. I mean, in some cases, sure, but genuinely, as at least here in the West, because on an individual level, they've decided this doesn't work, or it's an individual choice they've made, which is separate than a revolutionary army destroying and executing every member of the clergy, right? And tearing down those institutions.
Yeah.
That's what I would say to that. I'm not advocating for compulsory atheism, right? I'm not saying we should ban people from being religious,
every religious
because
person,
I don't
like,
believe.
listen, you should just stop it.
Yes,
And
because I don't
and then
believe
that would like do something good in some fashion, even though you have no reason to believe that.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue the case, right? I think like when you're talking
Please
about
argue
it, and
the
it's the
case
same
that
thing
everybody being
with
atheist would make
changing a
things
political
better in any
position.
one
It's the same thing
particular
with changing
sense.
someone's mind on anything. Ideally, you want to argue like logically, you want to get them to understand the perspective and why they should, and not do it because they're forced to or for some reason that's not rational, right? There's no point in replacing an irrational belief with another irrational belief, and that's at least my way of looking at it. When we're looking at like this sort of,
Problem is, most
I
people
don't know,
are
you-
just irrational, or at least have
I mean,
irrational beliefs.
all right, we already talked about that. So when I'm talking about like there should be like religion is bad for society overall, and people should not be religious ultimately because it's an irrational belief, and that in society is bad broadly. I would say like they have to like the thing about that is you have to convert them to thinking rationally about this topic, right?
Sure.
That's the only way to properly
Atheism
do
doesn't
it, in my
that, by
opinion.
the way.
About that one specific
About
instance,
anything.
that's what I'm saying. Like,
Atheism doesn't make you more rational about anything at all. Period. 100%.
I'm not saying atheism makes you more rational. I'm saying the answer of atheism to the God question is the rational answer. And that's it. That shouldn't come from like secularization, especially secular humanism, is a better thing to base society on. I would argue,
Yeah.
because that
So,
comes
I don't know.
intrinsic with like built-in principles about humanitarianism and liberal values and everything. So I think that's a goal, and I think that that's something that's come out of the
Which
atheist
doesn't
tradition.
exclude
That's
religion, so it's all good.
I'm sorry.
Which doesn't exclude religion, so it's all good.
Well, it doesn't exclude individual people practicing religion.
Nor religious institutions.
Well, it excludes the like commingling between church and state, right?
That's
It's,
fine. That doesn't
in
get
that
rid of
sense,
religious institutions, though.
Right, but it would get rid of like their tax exempt status or like the special place they hold in
No,
American
you want their
politics
tax
or
exempt
whatever.
status. You do want that. You
I don't.
You want that specifically. You do. Think of
No.
that for 2 seconds. If they don't have tax exempt status,
Okay.
then they would have absolute free reign to influence politics in every way that you don't want them to be able to do.
They're already influencing politics.
Oh,
They're
you
already
want, so you want to
influencing
make it
politics
like
in
a
every way I don't
billion
want them
times
to.
easier for them. Got it. Here's what I think.
I
should
don't
be the
think it would
case.
do that.
Here's what I think should be the case. If a religious institution, a church, or anything along those lines can be shown to be influencing politics directly, then their particular tax exempt status should be revoked. Not that all religious institutions' tax exempt status should be revoked, because then you make it easier for all of them to do it.
Anyways, yeah, obviously,
Anyways, I'm
especially
right,
you
so
guys
we're
know
moving
from
on.
just the
Got it.
amount of stuff we've like the amount of stuff we've researched on here. Religious extremist groups in America do have a hugely disproportionate influence over, especially the current
Primarily
regime,
being fought
but
by religious people, by the way.
in American politics.
Yep. Primarily
Um,
being fought by religious people.
Being fought by everyone, being fought by religious people and non-religious people.
Yep. So religious people are definitely the people that we want to align ourselves with when they share our values.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm saying.
So the bigger issues here, the actual
Like James
societal
Talarico, for
problems,
example,
the actual
would be my
societal
ally in the
problems that
fight
we need
against
to
the
be
regime, I would
looking
say.
at in terms of like trying to avoid are things like tribalism and dogmatism and oppression
Mhm.
and censorship
Yeah.
and scapegoating and
Sure.
purity spirals and ideological absolutism and various different charismatic individuals manipulating people. Now, these things
Well, sure.
all can appear in religion. They're not necessarily something that's intractable.
I
to
would say they're
religion, but
uniquely predisposed.
these
to
things
in
can all
religious-
appear and have appeared in secular political movements and nationalistic
yeah.
movements and revolutionary movements and race ideologies and cults of personality and hyper-partisan
Mhm.
democracies and all these sorts of things. So it seems clear that religion is not a necessary component for any of these.
Yeah, but I mean,
particular things.
a lot of this is like, especially if you're looking at our politics, that's sort of like faith-based, religious type thinking that's applied to things extra to religion, right? Like Donald Trump or something, right? So I mean,
So
like
they-
when we
so
look
you're-
at all
what
these
you're
tribal,
so you'd have to make the argument that they wouldn't do that if they weren't religious.
I mean, I don't think it's any like you can see who the majority of Christians vote for in this country, especially
You'd
like
have
the
to- you'd have
hardcore
to make the
religious
argument
people
that
who
they
don't.
would vote
I
for
should say
somebody
like people
else
who
if they
don't believe in
weren't
church and
religious.
state.
You'd have
I'm
to,
sorry?
You'd have to prove that they would vote for that they would be more reasonable, rational, or they would vote for somebody else or something. That there'd be some sort of substantive impact made. if
Well,
they
no, I'm
weren't
just they would be
religious.
more. So I think they would be more rational about that position. But I think all those things you described about the charismatic leader and everything, that all like faith-based thinking about the world makes all that you more susceptible to that.
And
And
yet,
religion is
we find that everyone, in fact, is susceptible to that across any ideology, including atheistic.
it depends.
ones
No,
and
I mean
secular
I wouldn't say
ones.
that necessarily.
Yeah, well, you'd
But-
have to you'd have to agree to that because you already agree that all those
Why?
things are indeed not necessarily inherent to merely religion, but in every single ideology.
That doesn't
that's
mean
ever
that
existed.
every single hold on. That doesn't mean that every single person displays those traits. There
I
are
didn't
some
say
people who
every single
display
person
traits.
displays
There are
those
some
traits.
people.
That's
Hold on. There are some people. Stop. There are some people who display traits that'll make them more likely to follow like Donald Trump or whatever ideologue and do all this evil shit that we were talking about. Okay. That my argument is that the religious thinking, when you accept that claim as truth without a rational reason too, that makes you predisposed to do that. Not everyone who does that is going to do that. Not everyone who doesn't do that isn't going to do that. But it's the same mechanism for thinking, that faith-based tribal thinking is what is my argument there. So I'm not saying like getting rid of religion would solve all these problems or
I
whatever.
like how you had to add
Again,
tribal
this should be a
thinking
gradual
just
thing where
faith-based.
individual people. I'm sorry.
I like how you had to add tribal thinking instead of just faith based because so far you haven't.
No,
really
I would say-
connected
well, I
faith
would
to
say, like,
any
they're kind of
negative in society at all.
I'm sorry.
So far, you haven't like connected faith to a necessary evil in any way whatsoever in any society. So you keep having to add things like
I mean,
tribalistic
again, like
faith-based idea. Like, okay,
Well,
fine.
faith. No, well, faith. Well, I mean, even still, I mean, religion is faith plus tribalism, isn't it?
No. What the fuck are you talking about?
Because religion is like a group of religious people typically who have a religion. You have an institution when you have a religion.
That doesn't mean
You
that
have a
you're
dogma beyond
tribalistic.
just the individual person when you have religion.
That doesn't mean that you're tribalistic.
That was written by other people.
What does tribalism mean to you?
I would say that it's a set of like values and behaviors that's designed to like create like a strong in group of the tribe that you're in, basically. And that
Strong
can come with
in-group
different.
preference for the tribe that you're in, right?
Yeah.
So what the fuck does religion do to make that the case?
I
What
would
do you-
just say that the
what the fuck
tribe
is
in
a
that case would be the
Unitarian?
religious community. I'm sorry.
How the fuck do you explain Unitarians?
Yeah, sure. Not every single religious person is again going to be
Then
like that.
that can't be
but I
your
would say-
definition of religion.
That I mean, okay, sure. Maybe that's not the definition of every single religion.
Oh
Like
my
there are people who are
God.
solitary or whatever, but the religious tradition comes out of like a tribal thing,
Specifically
right?
the
Like, it
bad
comes
religions
out
that
of-
I don't like. Those are the ones that I call
no,
that.
even I don't like any religion, but even religions, like even a solitary religious person who practices their faith without even communicating it to anyone else, like that's still built on a tradition of a social construct of religion with different institutions and dogmas and everything attached to it.
Not necessarily dogmas, but definitely institutions in terms of the
Yeah,
religious, in terms of
okay.
religious
Well-
institution by definition.
Right. And so that is tribal by definition, the institution,
It's
I would
not
say.
tribal by definition, no. It can't be by definition
inst-
because otherwise you'd have to explain the Unitarian Church, which you can't with that definition.
I mean, there are a lot of churches who will do outreach or whatever to people who are outside of their specific religion.
Yes, including
It's possible that
everybody.
the Unitarian Church is just they just don't have a. I mean, like the Unitarian Church is basically like they accept all faiths or non-faiths into their congregation, right?
Yes.
Okay. So I mean, even still, like their own individual claims or whatever, I would say they have I don't know exactly what those are. I don't know what supernatural beliefs
So
Unitarians hold.
with you defining religion as faith plus tribalism, and you defining tribalism as a institution that promotes strong in-group and behavior and preference and prioritization, any religious institution which opens its doors to people who are a part of the out-group does not match that particular definition. And since
No,
those,
not if the
since
out.
they
No,
exist,
no, 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 that's not true at all.
and since they do
Not if the
exist, then
no,
your
there are
definition is wrong.
no. You can. Oh, that's not every
All you
tribe,
managed
right?
to do is say that
Excludes anyone who
you
isn't a
think
member
that
of that
faith
tribe,
is
obviously.
irrational.
And oftentimes it's to get more people in the tribe, right? To get more people to join your religion. That's why there's that outreach. So that, I mean, but no, not just because you extend whatever to people.
They're
who are
already in the
outside of your
tribe, regardless of
doesn't
whether or not they
invalidate
share
any
all the
tribal
various
dogma
different
that you have.
dogmas. So long as
I'm
they
sorry?
come in, they are part of the tribe.
Yeah, I would say, yeah.
They don't need to adopt all the various different beliefs. It'd be nice, but you don't have to. That's the idea.
Okay, sure. The dogmas that believed in, though, developed through tribal mechanisms, is what I'm saying.
The things that are bad are bad. You need to. So your point.
Are you
here-
going to engage with what I said or no?
Well, the problem is that, of course, I agree that dogmatism isn't good. My point, though, is that that's not inherent to religion.
Uh,
The point that I'm making here
You don't think-
is that your issue is that people have faith and that is inherently irrational. So we should just not have that, and that would make things better. That would make the world at least a slightly better place, because it would make people less predisposed towards all the bad things like tribalism and dogmatism and oppression and censorship and all those sorts of things. But you haven't
Yeah.
demonstrated that, which is why I keep making fun of the fact that you keep having to add like dogmatist faith or tribalist faith or things like that. Like, yeah, specifically
Well,
those
I mean,
kinds
look, when
of
we
faith I
talk
would have a
about,
problem
let's just
with.
talk about just faith alone, right? Because
Yeah,
that's
just
not
faith
religion.
alone.
Isn't just faith, right? That's not what religion is.
What is it then?
But just faith, I would say, is the irrational belief, right?
What-
Like that's the irrational.
Yeah, there's
part.
a lot of good things about it too, isn't there?
Faith. I don't know about that.
No,
I'm not
religion.
sure. I think like any. Yeah, there are some good things. Sometimes religions do good things. I already said.
I'm not
that.
saying they do
You're
good
just trying
things.
to go
I'm
back to
saying
that
that there
one
are
point over and over
fundamental
again.
parts of it that are good,
Like what?
like the fact that it provides a sense of community to people.
I don't think that's always a good thing,
Maybe not
especially
always.
if it's a community based around irrational belief.
Maybe not always, but in general, you would of course accept the idea that we should be nice to our neighbors is a good thing.
I don't
that
think we should
they're all
build
a part of
community
a
off of
community.
faith. No, I don't think.
No,
like,
no,
I
no,
think
no,
that it
no,
depends
no,
on
no,
how
no.
the
That's a separate
community is
question. That's a
built.
separate question. That's a separate question. You would agree that instilling a sense of community and neighborly values into people is a good thing. Yes,
Yeah, it depends on what those are, though.
that we should.
And it
that we-
also
that
would
we're
be like, is
obligated
there a
to
way
each
to
other as a
instill
result
those
of the
positive
fact that we
values
live
without
around each other
religion
as a
too?
that we're obligated to each other as a result of the fact that we live around each other and we affect each other directly, and so we have an obligation to be good to each other? You would say that's a bad thing or a good thing?
I think that's a good thing, but I think that's a
Okay,
far
a
stretch
lot
to the
of
type of
religions do
community
that.
that you're talking
A lot
about
of
in a
religious
religious
institutions
setting.
have that as a fundamental part of them, actually.
Okay, so some of them do, sure.
Yeah.
But the religion is not a requirement for that, right? Because there are people who are not religious who have that
And,
also.
and not being religious is not a requirement for any sort of rationalism. So I
I didn't say again, I said atheism doesn't come with an ideology attached
didn't
to
say
it other than
atheism.
you
I
don't
said
believe in the
not
proposition.
being religious doesn't come with anything inherent either.
No. But that's not a positive claim.
Okay.
You're getting like the idea of believing in something is a positive claim. You shouldn't believe in things like we talked about without a good reason to believe in them. Even if the belief in that thing does have positive things. It's possible that okay, you believe in this and so you did something positive, but that positive
Everybody
thing could have been
does,
done.
including atheists. So I don't see what your point is.
Right, that doesn't mean that that's also good. You can look at certain irrational beliefs that
it's just
certain atheists
human.
have.
And if it's human, how are you going to get rid of it?
I mean, a lot of things are human that you should try to get rid of, right? Like violence or something like that.
No,
Like there are a lot of
something
negative
that's
traits that
ubiquitous
humans
to
have.
all living humans is what I'm saying. Not all humans are violent, but every human believes in something irrationally. Every single
Okay,
one.
but they shouldn't,
Including our
right?
biggest geniuses, the biggest brained people you can conceive of. We're irrational.
Okay,
in
what
some
what?
fashion.
Give me
Literally,
an example of one.
Oh, do you know about the Nobel Prize effect?
No, go ahead.
Ah,
Does
it's
this have
so
to do with
fucking
what we're
funny.
talking about?
Yes. So all of the biggest brain people who win Nobel Prizes, there is a weird
Mhm.
thing that happens where after they win a Nobel Prize and the thing that whatever
I don't
it
know
is,
if that.
whether it's biology or physics or whatever the case, we come to find out that they believe some fucking ape shit stuff later on down the line. Sometimes within a year,
what?
even like race realism.
Okay,
That's a
so
very
what? So
popular
it's
one,
possible,
actually.
again, for the 100th fucking time, it's possible for someone to have the correct position on one thing and the incorrect position on another thing.
Uh-huh. Gee, it's almost like this is my entire point.
Means nothing. That evidence you're putting forward doesn't have anything to do with what we're talking about.
The evidence
You
that I'm
know,
putting
some of these
forward
big
is that
brain.
even our biggest brain people believe things irrationally. So how the fuck are you going to get rid of it? And then you try to say that violence is some sort of inherent, ubiquitous human thing in our nature, when it's clearly fucking not, because we're able to
You don't
organize
think-
without violence all the fucking time.
Right, and people are able to think rationally and to forego their irrational
Not
thoughts
all the time.
fucking
They,
time.
they literally can't 100% of the time. Like, our brains are fundamentally irrational at least some periods of the time. We can't help it. It's just what it is.
Okay, so doing it, fine. I'll grant you that. For the, I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but that doesn't mean that that's desirable. That means that we should try to do less of that behavior. Yeah, I know violence is whatever.
Only if it leads
Darth,
to bad
whatever.
outcomes.
We're moving past that.
Only
We're
if it
moving
leads to
past
bad
that, buddy.
outcomes.
I
don't give a shit
No,
if
I
someone's
disagree.
irrational if it doesn't lead to a bad outcome.
would say that the act of being irrational over culture will lead to more bad outcomes. But more than that, it obfuscates like progress in a lot of ways, I think.
How?
Because if you're
all, let's thought experiment. What if all the progressive
Okay.
people wanted something progressive that would make the world a better place, but none of them have a good like reason to believe it, but they still believe it and they want it and they push for it and we end up getting it? Would that be bad? Like, let's say abolitionism had no good arguments, no good evidence for anything that anybody believed about it, no logical arguments, no one was able to come up with one, but all the abolitionists were like, I don't give a shit, we're not having slavery anymore. Would that be a bad thing?
The reason so if they just incidentally got rid of slavery without any good reason for getting rid of slavery,
Yeah.
That's not what happened.
Would that be a bad thing? Oh my God. Did
no,
you eat
probably
breakfast
not.
this morning? How would you feel
had
if
a
you
late
did or
breakfast.
didn't?
It depends. Why?
Oh my
Sometimes I
fucking
skip
God, bro.
breakfast. What? Like, here's the thing, man. Like, you're trying to say that
All I'm trying to do is ask you to connect faith to fundamentally at least one thing that's like bad, instead of just saying
irrational thought.
But that's not bad. Because
It is
irrational
bad.
thought can produce good things and bad things. It's neutral. Ow, fuck, I bit my tongue.
There are things that you could, like any good thing that irrational thought produces, you could also produce that without irrational thought, with rational
So?
thoughts, right?
So what?
No. Like slave abolition.
So what?
There's plenty of good reasons beyond religious faith to free the slaves.
So what?
So that's my point is like that the irrational belief isn't required for the good thing.
It doesn't matter if it's required. It's the fact that it causes both good and bad things. And it could cause
Right.
good things and it could cause bad things, but that doesn't make it good or bad. It's neutral.
Okay, religion is not a neutral, like just because something does some good things
Religion
and some
is
bad things doesn't
inherently
mean that it
neutral, which is
washes
why
out and
there's
that it's even,
constant
right?
infighting.
I'm sorry?
Religion is inherently neutral, which is why there's constant infighting and everybody constantly fighting over which position.
I don't
is
no,
the
it's
right
it's of course not inherently neutral. It makes strong claims, you
as a
know,
whole.
one way or another. And it's not like it's exactly 50% bad and 50% good either. And you can look at now.
Mhm.
Let's talk about the modern world, right?
Yep,
Before
the
we end
modern
it
world
here.
where religious people are primarily the ones who are standing in the way of the religious people who want to do bad things. Yes. What
Where-
else? What about it?
Where the most impoverished societies, the societies with the least civil rights, with the least amount of happiness in their people, tend to be more religious, and the more secular atheist societies
Why do you think
tend
that's
to
the
be
case?
I mean, it's
What's the causal
why
link?
do I think that's? I would say poverty has a lot to do with it.
So not religion?
No, I think that those things are kind of like reinforcing in a way. I think that when you have, and that of course isn't true in every.
I could
every
very
instance.
easily explain to you why the Nordic countries, like Scandinavia and whatnot, are less religious and yet are pretty happy and they're doing pretty good. And it has nothing to do with the fact that they're
Because they
less
have a
religious
basic
either.
standard of living and social cohesion.
Yes.
Yeah.
They've managed to get.
But
to
they
a
are
point.
less. But they are less religious,
So-
and that's the thing that's borne out over and over. Even here,
that doesn't make
unlike
it a
the
good or a bad
microcosm
thing.
of America,
no.
right?
If them being less religious isn't what causes them to be more happier or have everything taken care of them, who gives a shit?
I think it's probably part of it. But if you look here in America too, you can see like state by state, the least religious states typically are better in several categories than the more religious states. If you look at the South, if you look at Utah, right, versus a lot of the northeastern states.
None of that indicates that
Pacific
religion
Northwestern
is the
states.
reason why they're doing worse.
Well, there's correlation
Yeah, and
between a lower standard of life, more poverty, less
there's
education.
correlation between
right?
ice cream sales and murder. Who cares?
Not in the same way, no.
Okay, yeah.
It's not. You would have to establish. You would have to establish a pattern, right?
Yeah, whenever
beyond
there's
just
more
that.
ice cream sales,
And I'm
there's
not
more
saying there's a
murders.
direct cause, but I do think they reinforce
100%
each
of
other.
the
And I
time.
think
In
that
fact, it's highly
religious
correlative.
societies tend to be more oppressive, especially when it comes to civil rights. So, I mean,
Again, you could make them not religious and they'd still be the same way as far as I'm concerned. I don't see a reason why it would change.
wait, hold on. You're saying that taking away someone's religion wouldn't have any impact on their behavior?
If you did it in real time, that would probably be weird for them for like a couple weeks. But generally speaking, no, they wouldn't change as a person.
So then what's the point of religious conviction at all if it doesn't have any sort of transformative effect on you?
It's efficient in giving you shorthand and various sorts of things that are helpful to you in terms of navigating society.
Again, like you don't think that when you accept things based on faith and you're predisposed to that, it can interfere with your ability to reason in other parts of your life?
Yeah, I just think that everybody does that, not just religious people.
Does everyone do that to the same degree?
Yes. Well, actually, sure. Loads of people do it more than other people, sure, but like,
right.
that doesn't really.
But
mean anything. That's trivially
no,
true.
not everyone does it to the same degree.
True. Yeah, sure. Why?
There's a whole
Who
spectrum
cares?
of people doing that, right?
Yeah.
And is doing that more a positive thing, or is doing that less a positive thing? Which of those is preferable?
I don't know.
Okay. All right. Whatever. Anyways, there's a whole host of ills that have come from religious practices, right?
A
And
whole
what we
host
can
of
see is
good
the
things that have come from
secularization of
religion.
society. I'm sorry.
And a whole host of goods that have come from religion, and all the ills that are.
That's
that
fine.
religion
But
has
what we can
produced have
see is
also
that
been
as
fought against
society
by
has
religious people,
improved,
therefore-
as society has improved over the years, and as we've
Yep.
become more advanced technologically, and we have a higher care for human rights, etc., we become more secular. And the societies that are the most free, that provide the
Just real quick,
highest standard of
secular and
living, are the most
non-religious are
secular.
not the same thing. Just as a note.
I'm sorry.
Secular and irreligious are not the same thing.
Irreligious means you don't have a religion. Secular means you believe in the separation of church and state.
Yes, which they're not the
I
same.
don't think
thing.
anyone's confused about that.
Yeah, so
You
they're
all
not
know
the
what that
same thing.
means,
So
right?
we could have a 100% secular society.
I'm
and
saying
everyone
both
be
those
religious
things,
is what I'm
both of
saying.
those things together.
Oh,
That's what I'm
okay. So
saying.
you're like tying the secularism, which is the good thing that you like, with the other thing that you haven't really demonstrated. Is
They're
like a good
both
or
good
a
things
bad.
that I like.
Yeah, but you can't really justify the other one as being like a good thing.
I mean, I've done that already. I've made the case for that. I mean, if you
If
have
you
the
think so,
standard
that's
that,
funny.
if you have the standard, hold on, forget about like the ultimate outcomes. But if you have the standard that rational thought is preferable to irrational thought,
Mhm.
then we've already. I mean, like that's all we have to kind of go through.
Yeah.
If you don't have
I've
that
already
standard, then
demonstrated
you
that
won't feel
religion
that
is
way.
not necessarily irrational, but it's fine.
You didn't demonstrate that. No,
I
we
did.
went through that example, and then we had to keep on going back to
Yeah,
it.
the only thing
so
that you could
didn't.
do was say, well, maybe they're wrong. So all I needed to do was present a plausible
That's
case.
that's not what I said.
That is what you said.
I feel like you're having this debate with yourself, honestly.
No, I've listened
That's
and
not what I
responded
said.
substantially to
Like, how many
literally every
times have
single
I
thing
had
that
to
you
go
said.
back and repeat myself and restate
You
the
only
point or
repeat
whatever?
yourself because you can't engage with things I say, so you repeat yourself because you don't know how any other way to engage with the things that I say. That's why
I
you repeat
engaged
yourself.
with everything you said.
I've never
especially
said
when it came
anything that's
to,
caused you to have
to
to
the
repeat
reasonable
yourself because
argument
I've
for God that you were trying to
misstated what
give.
you've said. I've always stated what you said properly, and I've always engaged with everything that you said properly. I've never forced you to repeat yourself because I don't understand what you said, or I did, or I misheard, or I didn't represent it correctly. That's never happened throughout the entirety of this whole conversation.
I believe it did, but whatever.
Okay.
So I just want to say that, and I don't think that was malicious. I just think that we're heated in the debate, so whatever. But if you agree that irrationality is negative, less preferable to rational thought, then and if you agree that this belief is irrational, it's not the rational position, then that inherently would make that belief bad, negative. That's the argument. So if you don't believe that irrational thought is inherently bad, if you don't believe that reasonable thought, that a reasonable society is what we should aim for, then you're not going to care. My argument is that we should aim for that. I've given reasons for that. We've looked at in modern societies that tend towards more religiosity versus less religiosity, and more secularism versus less secularism. And we've seen the outcomes that they provide for their people. We can see that broadly. There's correlation there. We can look at the individual religious texts and dogmas and see how those things have been carried out historically. We can look at the way that religious institutions have been used to authoritarian ends, for suppression, to control people, to cover up crimes for the powerful. There's a whole host of things we can look at for why religion is ills, and saying like, well, there's also religious people who do good things, so it's not the religion alone that causes it. That doesn't invalidate that there are still negative things that are tied to religion that are caused by religion. Also, you can say that both good things and bad things are caused by religion. My argument again to that for the 100th time is that those good things can happen separate from religion, but those bad things a lot of times are predisposed by religious thinking. When we look at scientific progress, for example, we can see like how religious thinking would impede progress in that department, right? When we look at how we've advanced through agriculture and through other things throughout the years, we can see how if religious type thinking had been used to solve those problems, they wouldn't have been solved. It's a system of trial and error, of trying to get better and of looking at the empirical data you have, or using your brain to figure out what's true or what's most effective in that instance. It's not about faith, right? Faith, I don't think, is a good thing for society. It doesn't lead in people's personal lives, I think, to very many good things. There can be individual happy people with faith, but I think that over time, irrational thought is bad for people. It's bad for society. It does a whole host of things. Sure, there are examples of irrational thought, sometimes doing good things. That doesn't mean that it leads to good things necessarily.
You good?
Yeah, go ahead and respond if you want.
So human civilization is not built on pure rational calculation. It's built on meaning, moral formation, trust, inherited institutions, shared narratives.
It's built on
social
resources,
cohesion.
resource
I
allocation.
didn't interrupt you at all. Oh, no way.
We've been interrupting each other all night, but that's fine.
I let you go off that
Go ahead.
entire thing. I thought you were.
Go off.
Brother.
Go off.
I thought that was your closer. Is that not your
No, I
closer?
mean, I was just trying to restate everything we had talked about, but go ahead. I won't interrupt you.
Religion has historically been one of humanity's primary mechanisms for cultivating and transmitting all of the things that I've mentioned. Like every powerful human institution, religion, of course, can be abused. But the same tribalism and fanaticism and irrationality appear in secular ideologies and societies as well. The historical question is not whether religion has ever caused harm. Obviously, it has. But whether religion has, on balance, helped human societies organize morality, preserve knowledge, inspire reform, create community, and give people purpose and meaning. And history has clearly shown that it has. In fact, for a large portion of our history, religious people were the scientists. They were the literate. They were the people who understood things. They were the people who discovered new things about the world around us. They were the people who advanced us scientifically. We have Muslims to thank for a lot of our math. We have Christians to thank for a lot of our understandings astronomy and in the world around us. Of course, we have plenty of different types of belief systems that have led to us having a better understanding of society and a more progressive society as a whole. As I said in the very, very beginning, of course you can talk about things that religious people do that's bad. That's fine. I don't dispute that. I don't have to. The only thing that I need to prove and provide, which I have in every single instance, is that the people who primarily stand in against those evils are also religious people, which means that religion itself is not something that is inherently good or bad necessarily, though I have demonstrated that religion provides a number of goods to society in general. In fact, even the irreligious societies of the Nordic countries have primarily been built out of Christian traditions first, before they had the, let's say, privilege to fall away from regular practice.
Yeah. And I mean, like, when you look at the scientists or whatever who discovered things, obviously that wasn't because of their religion. You don't,
How
it
do you
again
know?
was because of their ability to use their empirical thinking, their empirical data, and their
They were
reasonable
inspired to
thinking,
become
and that's what
scientists
led
through
to
their
this.
religion.
That doesn't matter what inspired them to
Oh,
originally become scientists,
so
but
the reason
the
why they became a
mechanisms they used in
scientist
their
has
research to
nothing to do
uncover
with them becoming scientists and discovering things.
the
Got it.
original reason
That
why
makes
someone
zero
decides to
sense.
be a scientist doesn't. I was a scientist because my dad was a scientist before he got shot. So therefore, everything I discover through the scientific method is because my dad got shot. It's ridiculous. Of course, anyone can be a scientist for any reason. And when you're talking about living in a society that's unanimously religious, where you can't even be irreligious openly, of course, historically, everyone's going to identify as religious. If we're talking about like Galileo and Copernicus, they were censored by the church.
Galileo
They
was a big
they
fat
were
liar, by
repressed
the
by
way,
the
and you
religious
would hate him.
institution. Whatever, they were repressed by the religious
You
institutions
know
of their
nothing
time.
about the Galileo story.
Okay, thank you. So I mean, that's what I would say. Like, it's not, it's not a belief in God that caused people to make these scientific advancements. It's their using their minds and the scientific method to uncover that.
I love that he mentioned Galileo, and the reason why is because Galileo was a very irrational man. Including
Doesn't matter why.
including his discoveries that he made were in fact irrational by all standards. In fact, Alki would hate Galileo if he existed in the same time as him and call him an irrational retard. That is what he would call Galileo. You know why? Because the actual story
Has
of
nothing to do with the
Galileo
point I made.
is super fucking funny. So, Galileo
Oh my god.
discovered that we were in
Not
a
the point.
heliocentric model. Unfortunately, at the time, the math to demonstrate how that works didn't exist. He didn't know how to mathematically demonstrate his theories. He didn't know how to make it work because at the time they were working with Aristotelian mechanics. They didn't have Newtonian mechanics yet. So, relative motion, even in a small sense, wasn't something that his math was able to account for. So a lot of his writings and a lot of his predictions included things like waves that were 10 times higher than the tallest of skyscrapers regularly crashing upon the shores of the various different countries, of various sort of star formations that just do not happen and do not exist. And yet he wrote his book regardless. See, he couldn't prove what he believed. That's why the church censored him, because he kept lying about what he could prove. But you don't know that.
Anyway, can you repeat that again? Galileo was lying about what he knew.
Yes. He didn't
Okay,
have the math to prove what he said. So the church
that
told him, if you
that doesn't
can't-
mean he was lying about it. That means
yes,
the
it
method of
does.
proving it was flawed.
And the reason why is because in his book, he said the math actually does check out if you think about it. He was lying.
Okay, fine.
That's why
fine.
the church censored him, because he was a liar.
Okay, what about Kepler and Copernicus? Like, it doesn't matter if that one example is whatever. Like, the point is the scientific method is not based on religious dogma, right?
Yeah, but a lot of people get into science as a result of their belief in religion. In
It
fact,
do-
religion
again,
is very helpful.
It
for a
doesn't
lot of
matter. It doesn't
scientists.
matter why they get into
So
science.
religion
That's
is
not
very
the point.
helpful for a lot of scientists because a lot of scientists who are religious, the reason why it works for them a lot better is because they believe that God created a world that is knowable and discoverable and rational and reasonable. They don't believe that God creates a world that's not understandable. So that helps them to focus and be able to better compartmentalize the various different confusing things that you find at higher levels of science, as they say, I have faith that my God does not simply, is not a confusing God, is not one that tries to fuck with my brain by making me think things that aren't true. So all of this stuff has to make sense at the end of the day somehow. And that is what drives their intellectual curiosity. So to say that religion has nothing to do with their ability to do science, when that is directly the reason why they even are able to do science in
With
the
the
first place,
scientific method
is
is what I said.
crazy.
Has
Yeah.
nothing to do with the scientific method. They can be inspired and compartmentalize however they want with their individual feelings about a thing, but when they're actually doing the
no
science, that's
ideology
not
has anything to do with scientific method
faith-based
outside of
religious
methodological
thinking.
naturalism, and
Right.
and most people have no idea what the fuck that is.
Okay. All right. Do you have anything else you want to say here?
Oh, I think I think I've dog watched you enough. I think we're good.
Sure. Anyways, I guess I'll close it then. My point is religion is bad for society because it encourages irrational belief, which is inherently bad for society. It's inherent to believe in irrational things. That's my position. Religion, it encourages, tribalistic, superstitious thinking. A lot of bigotry comes from religion. That's not the only place those things come from, but religion is a compartmentalized social way for those things to be cohesive in society and to spread. It stood in the way of scientific and social progress in a lot of ways. Some religious people have been contributed to those fields in a lot of ways, but that doesn't mean that that's because of their religion. And it's not secular values that lead to those things. It can be used to control and suppress the population by a cynical ruling class. And, the modern cultures that are more religious tend to be worse, poor, and more repressive. That's my argument. I feel like I've already stated everything that I have to state on this for now. But yeah, I think we can wrap it there, guys.
Awesome. He's a bitch. Baba booey, baba booey.
What's up? You want to say? Anyone else want to say anything before I end the recording?
Have any sort of questions from the audience or anything like that?
Yeah, if you have any
I know a lot of you
questions.
probably want us to just fucking move the fuck on.
So, Wendy, you believe that that it is of value to think logically, correct?
I think it's generally.
Do you
a good
value
thing to
that?
do Yeah.
Okay. But
People don't
but if
necessarily
illogical things bring you to a good conclusion or cause you to act good, that is just as good as acting that way because of a logical reason.
Sorry. What? I was.
So if I act a certain good way because of an irrational reason, that would be just the same to you as acting the correct way because of a rational reason, right?
Generally speaking, I would prefer that you have a rational reason, but at the end of the day, I'm fine with it.
Okay. Why would you prefer that I have a rational reason?
Because, as you pointed out, the more rational you are, holistically speaking, the more you're likely to come across the correct beliefs, generally speaking.
All right. That's my point. That's it.
Okay.
All right. Let's end it there then.
Had nothing to do with the prompt.
Yeah.
But
It did. It's
the prompt is:
it did.
Is religion a net good or a net bad for society? And the only thing that you're willing to judge religion on is whether or not faith is rational, which you can't even prove one way or the other.
No, I mean my argument was that religion tends
Meanwhile,
to
I
have
gave a
more irrationality in
bajillion things that
society.
religion is nice shorthand for, that works for like loads of people all over the world. And you're like, yeah, but they could do it without religion.
They could, yeah, they could. And also, like,
Yeah, but you can't prove that. That's
we're
just
not going
you're
through.
just taking that
We're
on
not
faith.
going through the long
You're just
list of
taking that on
ills
faith, so
that have
it's
been
all
done
good.
on account of religion, right?
You're just taking that
So
on
I mean,
faith,
it's
so all
again,
good.
it's like immaterial to even what I'm trying to discuss here. My
Yeah, I
overall
know.
point.
Yeah. I have faith that everyone can manage to be completely rational people without religion too. We're both faith brothers. We're faith enjoyers over here.
Good one, I guess. No, not really. But all right, guys, have a good
You have
night.
no
Thanks for
idea.
watching. No, I do get the